Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Jo's Art History Podcast, a podcast which celebrates all things art historical, with me, Jo McLaughlin. It's great to have you back, and this week I'm bringing you another episode dedicated to the one, the only, Tracey Emin. This week I'm joined by Diane Ketteringham, who is an artist based in the UK. Diane has a deep love of Tracey Emin, and we have a really brilliant conversation about one of Emin's key pieces, which is called Everyone I Have Ever Slept With, 1963 to 1995. But it might be better known to you as the tent. Tracey Emin's work, Everyone I Have Ever Slept With, A.K.A. the tent, is really one of the works that put Emin on the map. And when it was exhibited, it caused a complete uproar. And she exhibited this a few years before she went on to show her now infamous work, The Bed. For those of you who may not have heard of The Tent, it is an installation piece where Tracey has embroidered the names of every person that she's ever slept with from 1963 to 1995. What's interesting is I wonder where your mind has gone there, because I certainly thought it was a bit more sexual than what it first appears to be. Diane and I have a really great chat where we discuss how easily such as titles and words can misconstrue somebody's meaning, and how words can easily lead you to think one thing when it's actually another. Diane herself is also a professional astrologer and gives us a look into Tracey's birth chart and talks to us a little bit about her characteristics and what makes her tick, really, and everything's pretty much on the nose from what I've read about Tracey Emin. Now, Diane and I recorded this back in February of 2021, so thank you so much, Diane, for your patience. This has been a long time in the making for me to release this as an episode, and I completely adored listening back to this. And we have a really fantastic chat. We also discuss one of Tracey Emin's quilted works as well, and how, along with a whole host of other artists, Tracey has really taken up the art of embroidery as within the feminist movement, and to reclaim it as something powerful and not so twee. It's a fantastic episode and it gives you a lot of food for thought, so I'm delighted to bring this to you. So just sit back and relax and enjoy Diane Ketteringham and I speaking about Tracey Emin's work, Everyone I Have Ever Slept With. Enjoy! Tracey Emin.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about her iconic work called Tent, or by its full title, Everyone I've Ever Slept With, 1963 to 1995.
Yeah.
Have you first and foremost, have you seen this work in real life?
I have seen this work, and it was before I was sort of involved in art myself. And I went to visit a friend in Bristol, and she took me to a gallery, and she said, "Go and have a look at that." And there was this tent, My memory, this is, a long time ago. I thought it was a yellow tent, but I've since looked online and it's actually blue, but it is kind of yellow inside. So I approached this tent, which I was a bit surprised to see a tent in this gallery, it's in the middle. And the security guy came up to me and gave me a torch, which surprised me even more. So I climbed into this tent and sort of closed it. So I'm in a public place and suddenly taken by surprise, I'm in this very intimate space with a torch, reading all these appliqued statements, really, that she'd stitched to the inside of the tent. Some of it was names of people. And it wasn't just sort of people, it was sort of childhood, people she slept with platonically, children who'd been put to bed in the same bed, the whole range. But there are these smaller ones round the bottom of the tent walls. And it was all, it was things like, "Oh, Colin, I loved you, but you just used me and treated me like shit." There were these very heartfelt outpourings, and I was so moved at the honesty of it and the intimacy of it in this public. I was alone with the torch, and I just thought it was brilliant. I'd never come across an art installation before, and I was just blown away by it. I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I've seen it. I've been inside the tent alone with a torch. It was brilliant.
I love that. So obviously researching for this podcast, I was looking at sort of videos and reading articles, and it has become this cult piece by Emin. But what I didn't know was that you could climb inside it, because that just would not happen now. And I mean, this was kind of the piece that really helped propel her and put her on the map. She was a young British artist, known sort of, abbreviation of that is YBA for everyone who's listening, and that's come across that term before. But she really wasn't very well known. Damien Hirst was quite well known at this point in time. So was people like Sarah Lucas. But it was this tent that did it, and it was a huge controversy, was it not, when it was exhibited for the first time?
I'd never heard of her, Jo. I'd never heard of her, so it was like, ooh, it was really very moving and very surprised. I was just amazed really at the whole thing. So I got her name was imprinted in my mind from that point on. I've heard as well, it burnt down, didn't it, in the fire in Charles Saatchi's warehouse. Apparently she was, insurance offered £1 million for her to recreate it. And she said she couldn't possibly recreate it because she'd spent 6 months sitting in her co-op flat in Waterloo, sewing up her old clothes and her grandma's night dresses. That's what it was composed of,
Yeah, it's amazing. And I mean, it's something that people, even though it's no longer in existence, people are still writing about it. I mean, even this morning, I came across an article that was written. So we're recording this in March. It was written the first week in February of this year, 2021. And someone, again, just diving back into the Emin archive and really trying to explain why this was so impactful. And I said to you before we pressed record, it's great for me as an art historian to revisit these pieces, even though I'd known of it, of course, but to give it a wee bit of a deep dive, but also coming at it as an older woman now than what I was when I first came across it when I was like 17, 18. And when I read that it was, like you said, it was full of all these names, and there was 102 names. And when I read that 102, I instantly in my head was like, oh, that's quite a big number. And then when I read on with it was a lot of it was platonic, as you said, friends that she had, had sleepovers with, her grandmother, her brother, and it made me catch myself, and I was like, oh, you judged her for a second. Not that I was trying to like slut shame her. I just, by my very exposure, I was like, oh, that's quite a high number. And then I found this brilliant interview with her, and I'll link that in the show notes below, where it's only maybe like 2 or 3 minutes long, and it's exactly what she says. She said people see the name everyone I've ever slept with, and they instantly go, why should we care about how many people you've had sex with? And she says, that's it exactly. Why should you care? And it's not that at all. And when they visit the exhibition and they see the piece, they take it back because they're like, oh, we judged it too soon. And it's exactly what I did. And it's 2021. And it was a real moment of, wow, this woman is something special. And the more that I read about Tracey Emin, and the more that I do these podcasts where I speak to people about different artists, Tracey Emin, some way or another, has a habit of coming up. I mean, why do you think that is?
I think we all do judge her. People do judge her too quickly. And, loudmouthed. And there was some event where she was drunk on TV or something or the other, and some show, and she walked off. But she said she was then invited to thousands of talk shows after that in the hope that she would do that again. But she stopped drinking, she said, in 1999, she stopped completely. But included in all the people she's ever slept with were, she put, I didn't see it at the time, I didn't notice it at the time, fetuses, because she had 2 abortions very close together as a young woman. And she said in an interview that they had slept inside it, you know, so that was very moving.
Yeah, very powerful. And
yeah. And apparently she burnt all her artwork after she had those abortions.
oh, I didn't know that. I mean, she's quite incredible because, like you said, you know, when she was offered £1 million to sort of remake the piece, she said it's far too emotional, I couldn't. And she actually, the piece came about as a bit of a revenge project for her old boyfriend who had gotten her. So she used to date this gallerist. For people that don't know, she used to date a gallerist called Carl Freeman. And the Carl Freeman Gallery is now in Margate, which is where Tracey Emin was brought up for the first few years of her life. And so she was about 7 or 8. And he had got her a space in this exhibition where she could show with her contemporaries like Damien and Sarah Lucas. And she was making smaller pieces at the time. And he said, I think you should make something a bit bigger because your small pieces aren't as weighty. So it needs to hold up. And she was like, oh, I'll show you. And created this amazing thing. And it's so powerful, even now, iconic, and it's no longer in the realms of existence. But it's such a, I don't know, a great way of how art makes you think. Because even this morning, like I said, it really made me think, one, how I've been automatically programmed to read a number, and when someone says slept with, where I go, where I think everyone goes.
Yeah.
And then it also taught me a lesson of, makes me think of, you know, where I stand in that. And in this interview as well, she had this great thing. She was like, you know, and then it makes you think about all the people you've slept with, both, you know, sexually and otherwise.
Yeah.
And what that means to you now. I thought it was brilliant. It's an amazing piece.
She said as well, when she'd been exhibiting it, one of these people mentioned in the tent came up and was pleased that his name was there. And another was furious and said, how dare she put his name in the tent? And she said, well, you shouldn't have slept with me, should you? And some guy sold, someone she'd been involved with when she was, I think, 14. She said he'd been 21 or 22. Sold her love letters to him that she'd written when she was 14.
No.
And she was scandalized by that. She said that's a completely different thing. Yeah. He put them on.
I think it is because, you know, a name is one thing. There's no intimate reveal there really. And
there was a bit of, you know, well, you did this and you were horrible. I mean, there was a bit of intimate reveal in some of it. But just the first name, you know, there were a bit intimate. Some of it was a bit intimate.
Some more than others then. But I think to release something, I mean, she was doing the tent, she's a grown woman. When you're 14, no, there's something really, that's just opportunist though. But I have to ask the question, do you think it caused such a mass controversy when it was put on show? And people flocked to it and would still do, I think, if it was, you know, if it was still around and able to be exhibited. Do you think it was because she was a woman in 1995 being like, here you go. If that was a man, would it have the same punch?
Probably not, because she's been so open, and women are judged, aren't they, for being open about their personal lives. They're judged. I wasn't really involved in the art world, you know, or followed or particularly interested in the art world at the time. So I don't know what the reaction was. I just know my reaction, which was like, amazing.
But I love that it's so powerful. And also at the bottom, you know, on the bottom of the tent, as you climb in, she embroidered, with myself, always myself, never forgetting. So I think Tracey's got this amazing, even, I mean, the whole way through her career, she was always talking about mental health. She was always examining herself. She always, and still does, she uses herself as the sole model, inspiration, and really likes to pick herself apart. And I don't really think until now people have appreciated how vulnerable that is, but how much it kind of shows you as a strong person to not be afraid to pick yourself apart publicly and, I don't know, put it out there for the world.
Yeah, the vulnerability and the courage are just, yeah, they're fantastic.
No, absolutely. But interesting that you said about the fire as well. So I remember this happening, and the fire was in 2004. And for some reason, I thought it happened later than that, because I was so sure I heard about it at university, but maybe it was I read about it during a lecture or was told about it. Maybe that's where the numbers have got confused. But this was a huge, huge fire. And Tracey has come out and said that, people weren't sympathetic when the fire happened. It was actually people were ridiculed her and sort of made fun of the fact that this had happened, almost like it was some kind of form of karma, that all these works were burnt down. It wasn't even just Tracey that lost her work. There was a lot of pieces from, Damien Hirst, Sarah Luca, Jake and Dino Chapman, pieces from the National Gallery, pieces from the Royal Collection. This was a huge big warehouse that was run by Momart. And what started the fire was essentially people broke into one of the units to steal computers.
Oh,
and
really?
they set the fire to cover their tracks.
Oh no.
And then the fire just spread, and it completely snowballed. I've got a really great quote actually that I'll read to you about when this happened. So obviously, it happened in a East London warehouse in 2004, and Tracey is quoted as saying, "The news comes between Iraqi weddings being bombed and people dying in the Dominican Republic in flash floods. So we have to get it into perspective. The majority of the British public have no regard or respect to what me and my peers do, to the point that they have laughed at a disaster like a fire. It is just not fair, and it is not funny, and it's not polite, and it's bad manners. I would never laugh at a disaster like this. I just have some empathy and sympathy with people's losses." And I think even saying something like that, addressing it in that way, straight to the point, it's not funny. You don't respect what we do. I just have immense respect for her. I think she's so intelligent, and I think people really underestimate and undervalue how intelligent she is. And this fire as well. I mean, for people that are interested, that are listening, there's a great article actually, because when this warehouse fire happened in 2004, it then sort of catapulted this whole, started this conversation around art insurance, and it made a lot of people, particularly galleries and collectors, consider, what happens? Do I need to insure my collection against fire? Is that under, so there's this whole thing that we won't get into now, because this is not what this chat's about, but I'll leave a link to that article. It was really, so I came across it this morning, a really interesting read. But I mean, when, as someone that has obviously experienced the tent and felt that, what was it like being in that room? Were people talking about it? Were people sort of huddled around?
No one was paying any attention to it. They're all staring at the walls, paintings on the walls, It was just my friends saying, go and have a look at that. And me, so nobody was around it, nobody was looking at it even. It was just lonely tents in a big hall full of paintings,
And was it Emin paintings, or was it a mixture of things?
I don't remember anything except the tent. I don't remember anything. I don't know what it was. No idea.
I think that's, even that in itself though, tells you a lot, that from a whole day, the only thing that really is burned into your memory is this tent and this experience. And I think this can show, this is a great example of the power of art. You know, all these years later, you still remember it, you know, vividly, how it made you feel. And I think Tracey's brilliant at that. She makes you feel something, and she's got a great way of like hitting a nerve that you didn't even know was potentially a
Shows in
raw
her birth
nerve.
chart, in fact, in the area for communication, she's got Mars and Pluto, which is very, in Virgo, very precise, very hard-hitting, very powerful, painfully honest. You know, it's like painful, and that shows in her birth chart as well.
Oh.
And she is like the tent, sort of standing alone in this gallery full of paintings on wall, you know, like traditional classical work that is arranged on walls. And she's sort of like this tent standing alone in this huge space, being vulnerable and honest, and, you know, have just, yeah, I admire her very. She is quite difficult to, you know, in interviews, she's a strong flavor, but you can't do her down, you really can't. And it was the wrath of God or something that her work burnt down in the warehouse. I mean, there's so much judgment in that, isn't there? That, you know, perhaps misogyny as well.
Well, that's it. And, you know, it wasn't, I think it says a lot that that was the piece that stood out as the thing that has burnt down. Because like I said, there was lots of other great losses. But if you say to me, oh, yeah, the Montmartre fire, I'd be like, oh yeah, Tracey Emin's tent. And actually, an artist called Stuart Semple went in and sort of collected some of the ashes from this fire and tried to sell, made it into a work and tried to sell it to the Tate, and by saying that it included sort of fragments of the tent. So other artists have seen that disaster as an opportunity, which I think is really interesting. So even other artists could see, oh, there's something in the brand that is Tracey Emin. Let's try and get on it. I think it's so interesting. Something else that you wanted to talk about with Tracey Emin, something that you've experienced, is one of her quilted works, which is something I completely forgot that she did. She's just so multifaceted and talented, and a bit kind of like David Hockney in a way. She tries all different medias. She's not this one-trick pony. She doesn't like to pigeonhole herself. She'll try it. So what is this work that you came across, and where were you when you saw it?
I think this was in the Haywood Gallery in 2011. It was her quilts. It was advertised as her quilts. She calls them her blankets, which I don't know why, but she does. But they're quilts, in fact, with the pliqued writing and different symbols. I've since looked online and seen a whole range of them that I didn't remember. Again, I didn't remember anything except just this one that I can't find online. I think it was sort of browny, sort of muddy brown background, and just huge red, in red letters, dark red letters, appliqued on to this quilt. You were supposed to protect me.
Oh,
Speaks volumes, doesn't it?
and what, I mean, was that aimed at someone? Has there been any sort of?
Well, must have been. You know, I assume that's aimed at some parental figure or an adult. And I've since read that she was raped when she was 13. I don't know the details. I don't know who by. I don't know. But that sort of spoke of abuse to me. Well, I didn't know any of that when I saw it, and I just thought, oh gosh, yeah, very heart hitting. I don't remember all the rest. I seem to have this memory. I remember one thing and I have no idea what was going on around it. But that was very, you know, so poignant. And there was a video in the same exhibition, very small on an old video screen, a video that she'd clearly made herself. It was like a homemade video, black and white. It was her interviewing her mother in a very challenging way about why her mother thought Tracey shouldn't have children. And seemed very sort of pleasant, very nice, trying to keep it nice, trying to be evasive, trying to avoid the question, you know, the issue. And with me, I went to the exhibition alone. I don't like going with other people because then you're under pressure to, you know, finish it. I want to spend as long as I want or go backwards and do it.
I'm there with you.
And
that's exactly what I do. I love going to an exhibition on my own, and people think it's a very antisocial thing, and I'm like, no, like there's no pressure on you then. Like, come on, I want to get to the coffee shop.
And there was me and about maybe 6 other women who I didn't know were sat on these sort of stools watching this tiny screen, and it was getting more and more intense, you know. And then the exhibition ended. We had to leave the book, you know, before the end of the video. And it was like, oh no, it's like sort of being sent to bed when you're a kid and the program hasn't finished, you know, but worse. And we were all, but can't we just, no, closing time, you know. And I think that was the last day of or there was one more day, but I couldn't go back. So I never saw the end of that. But she was pressing her mum so hard. And her mum was trying to keep it nice and being pleasant. And so that I'll never forget that.
So can you remember any of the questions that she asked and any of the responses that are, you know, obviously very loosely given?
Just sort of voicing really the same question again. It was like a hard talk interview and saying, oh, well, you had children, Mum, so why do you think I shouldn't have children? And her mother was saying, oh, well, I don't know. I said, it was just saying the same question in different words, straight. It was relentless in a way. And she was very, quite abrasive in that interview. And you might think yourself, well, maybe it's best she didn't have children, you know, but that's another judgment as well, isn't it? But in her birth chart, she's got Sun in Cancer. So ruling planet is the Sun. She's got Leo ascendant, very public. And the Sun in Cancer is very maternal.
Oh.
Yeah. And she had these 2 abortions when she was, you know, a young woman. She wrote, there was one piece of work about she wasn't a mother, so she expected to die alone. And she said she nurtures events in the art world. She's a nurturer of events in the art world. This expectation to die alone it's very honest again, isn't it?
Well, that's it. And I mean, going back to the interview, I mean, I'm a woman in my 30s, and I'm trying to put myself in that position. If my mum said to me, Joe, I don't think you should have children, you would be devastated, because there's this bond between, I mean, everyone's got a bond with their mum in some way, be that a good bond or not, but particularly women to women, you know, they are the authority in motherhood. And I think for someone who I admire so much to say to me, who has, you know, raised me, you're not fit to be a mum, you shouldn't have kids. I wouldn't look at that as a feeling on her. I would look at that as a feeling on me that I haven't met someone else's criteria. And it's like the thought of it now, even a friend saying to me, you shouldn't be a mum, is terrible. And it's things I've thought myself. Do I want children? Would I be good with children? I mean, it's questions you ask yourself as a woman, and you're conditioned to ask yourself as a woman. You know, you're kind of expected, this is your place, this is your thing. But, and again, very vulnerable, but very smart, and addressing an issue psychologically that's very difficult, and that a lot of women face. Because for a man, you know, it doesn't matter. Do you want kids? Do you not? I'll see how I feel.
Not even know, can't they?
Exactly. But for a woman, you're kind of told, you've got a window. So, I think it's so tough. I actually, so video wise of Tracey, I've seen the one where she talks about getting her abortion, and I think she made it in like 1996. And it was an exhibition, so it was replayed at an exhibition in 2000, this might be 2018, at the White Cube in Bermondsey in London. And this was just after her mother had died. So it was very raw. It was, again, there was a lot about motherhood, feeling a loss of not being a mother, and then the loss of her mother. And it got to a point in the exhibition where I started to cry, and I was like, I have to leave, it's too much, because it was so raw. And again, going back to what you said, that line, you were supposed to protect me. And one of the lines was, in one of her paintings, was, "You're gone, I cried a fortnight of tears." And I was like, oh, I have to go, because it touched something so raw that I mean, there's always that worry around loss and things that you can't control. But it's so, I don't know, she does it in a way where she'll just floor you in a sentence, and that is powerful and not easily done.
No, not easily.
And I think the idea with these quilts as well, like I said to you, this was something that I completely forgot that she does. So it was great to sort of dip in and see the sorts of things that she's using, and coming at it now from a woman in my 30s, I saw it as this, you know, quilting, if you will, was this traditional craft for women. It was very nicey, very subordinate, kept you in line, a bit Victorian in hobbies, kind of up there with collaging, bit Victorian. And that's no beef on, that's not to dismiss collaging. And she's again turned this on her head, like she's owned it in a very, okay, this is a women's craft, here's a women's opinion, here's what I'm going to say to you.
She said, I can't find it anywhere online, but I think she said during that interview that at one point her mum had left the family, and then I think, but I can't find any evidence of this, Jo, but in my memory, for what it's worth these days, I think she said that. But I know her dad had a parallel family alongside their family that they discovered later, you know. So that was a big one for her. And after seeing her birth chart with this Mars and Pluto and Virgo in the third house, this hard-hitting nail, you know, hitting the nail painfully on the head, it often shows conflict with siblings and things. And I didn't know whether, I knew nothing about her family other than seeing this video. I thought her mum had sloped off and then come back again at some point. And I discovered she's got a twin brother who epilepsy, is an unemployed carpenter on subsidies, which I thought, there's an interesting word, because it's not benefit. Have they used subsidies to avoid the use of the word benefits, or is she subsidizing? You know, that wrote lots of questions there. And
I never thought of that, because I had read that, because you can Google, if you Google Tracey Emin's brother,
it comes up. I didn't know she had she's got a half brother from a mum's earlier marriage or something, I think. But yeah, I didn't know she had any siblings. I thought she was, I don't imagine her with siblings, you know, but there's some very sweet photos when she was such a, like a pretty girl in a dress, you know, there's some very sweet photos.
Yeah, but she's a beautiful woman. She is beautiful. Going back to what you said there about the birth charts, because this is very new territory for me. And for the listeners as well, can you maybe explain what a birth chart is and the significance and what it means to a person?
It's a map, really. It shows the position of the planets in the heavens in relation to you at the moment you were born. And it shows where your talents and potentials lie, emotional conditions in childhood and what that leaves us to work through as an adult, where we start off feeling most fearful in life, which can become our greatest strength if we look into it rather than avoid the difficulty of it. Relationship needs and requirements, and the life's work or mission. So it gives just tons of fascinating information. It's one way of looking at things. It's not the only way of looking at people, but you know.
Yeah.
And so if there's anyone in the news or anyone I'm interested, I always look at the birth chart. And she's got this Leo, very public ascendant, which is how you approach the world, which means the sun is the ruling planet, sun in Cancer, which also the relationship with the mother is very important, as well as being maternal, nurturing oneself. But it's in the 12th house, which is to do with, well, it's to do with sort of pain and healing and the pain and suffering of others and compassion and sort of spirituality. It can be self-undoing, you know, sort of self-attack in a way, and also creative work behind the scenes. So her ruling planet, the sun, is here dealing with all these emotional material of herself, of her life. And she wrote, I've got a quote here that she said in an interview. She said that when she's painting, it's emotion that comes out of me is like a whirlwind, like I'm going into another world. It's frightening. And now she's back in Margate, and she said, I've got all of these locked memories of my childhood and all this darkness and all the things that I've got to get out before I die. I've got to work on them. It's going into the darkest recesses of my mind. And now in the plate where lots of these things happen. So the return to Margate is hugely symbolic for her, hugely symbolic. And
yeah,
just fascinating, really fascinating.
so her birth chart shows her as this strong communicator,
very
really
precise, as you were saying about hitting the nerve, very much like that. Also Mars in Vega, very clever hand. So all this needle work, you know, that takes, not everyone, not all painters can get involved in that on that sort of level. And she's got Mercury and Venus in Gemini, which is good at communicating with with the public, very good communicator. And difficulties with the mother, difficulties with the father. With the mother, there's a sort of split between the maternal and the erotic, and the mother can't encompass both. So then that can make it difficult for the child to encompass both. And there can be a danger of looking for emotional needs in one kind of person and erotic needs in a different sort of person, continuing the mother split. And the challenge is to sort of bring them together. But she's very adamant about how monogamous she is. I've found that in a few interviews since we spoke about doing this. And a friend, you know.
And it's interesting there what you said about her being, having to grow up very quickly and be very independent as a young adult, because she dropped out of school at 15, and she, by no mean feat, I mean, this is not an easy thing, she got into the Royal College of Art to study there. So, which doesn't really happen if you drop out of school at 15. Your life's kind of almost, in society, if that happens, you're kind of almost written off, really, like, oh, you'll do an apprenticeship or whatever. Not to play that down at all. You're told that the correct way of doing it is to go to college or to go to university. But I love that, and it's so interesting, and everything that you're saying there, I'm like, yeah, that's like on the nose, her, what she is. A really interesting, because when you wrote me to say, oh, I do birth charts, could we maybe include it? I was like, absolutely, this is amazing. Like, this is such an it's a completely, as you said, it's just a different way of looking at it. And what's the harm?
And the mission is in Cancer in the 12th house. So it is about plumbing emotional depths, getting to the truth of her emotional depths and presenting that. And she was in hospital quite recently with really aggressive cancer, and goodness, really aggressive. And she said that she sent an email to everyone saying she didn't want any visitors. She just wanted to be alone. And that also is very 12th house, time spent alone. and sort of retreats and sort of monastery, religious orders that all comes into under the 12th house, as does addiction, as does fame and showbiz. I mean, there's lots of things come into that. Prison, all sorts of things come into that. But the fact that she wanted to be alone during her ordeal and recuperation, and she loved it. She just loved being alone in the hospital. They removed, I think, her bladder, her urethra, her womb, half of her vagina, and she's on a bag now and just so glad to be alive.
I didn't know she was that sick, because it was very played down in the media, because she only, I mean, this was 2020, all this happened, and she just came out at the end to say that I'd read one thing that because she just released a very quick statement being like, I thought I was going to die. It was very aggressive. And that's all I read. And I was like, oh, I'll leave her to that, because I know people that have had cancer. It's very invasive. It can completely flip, and it flips everyone's world on their head. And everyone listening, everyone knows somebody that's had some form of cancer. And so when she released that, I was like, yeah, okay, I would I didn't realize she was that sick. Oh my gosh.
A friend of mine made me laugh, and he said, because I was telling him about this, and he said, oh God. I said, what? He said, oh, there's going to be one of those bags in her next exhibition. And I thought, yeah, no problem. So why not?
But why not? But then also then she becomes an activist for, disability representation. And there's a lot of people that live their life day to day, very successful people that have stoma bags. One of my artists, so I work in a gallery during the day, and he was very, very ill 2 years ago, and he now has a stoma bag. But for him, he was like, I'll take it over not being here. And a lot of people have it. It's incredible. And there's a woman that I follow online, actually, and she has a stoma bag as well, but she's designed a whole set of sort of sexy lingerie for stoma bags. Yeah, her name's Hannah Witten. But it's amazing, because quite rightly so, everyone's body is different, and you have to celebrate that. And sometimes, things happen out of your control, as you've just said, and powers that be, in order to stay alive, your body has to adapt. You have to be given help. And why should you feel any less beautiful because it's not normal? Using air quotes here for the listeners, Diane and I are over Zoom, so you can see how much I talk with my hands. Oh, I love that. It's so interesting. Is there anything else that you want to say about Tracey before we wrap up? Anything that
what she's going to bring next? And I think she's mellowed quite a lot over the years. She's mellowed. And she's very pleased because someone had said that she's ladylike in some review. In some interview, the reporter had mentioned that she's very ladylike, and she liked that. Yeah. So she's still raw in the honesty, the honesty is raw, but she's got all this life experience, and she talks a lot about her age, and reflects on the whole journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like you said, she has this hunger to keep creating, and I saw that after her mother had passed away. There was this huge outpour of work, and I mean, like within a year, she'd filled the white cube again with something else, and then she was doing a huge big she won a commission to do for the Edvard Munch museum.
Yeah.
This huge big piece called The Mother. So the theme of motherhood is there. It's always there, this maternal debate that she has with herself, with other people. And very much, like I said, that video that I'd seen about her talking about her abortion, she was so torn, and almost like as a woman she'd let herself down because she had done something like that, and she had male doctors trying to tell her, you're doing the wrong thing, you're going to regret this. again, that conversation of having a man tell a woman how they should feel about their body, how they should, you know, what they should and shouldn't be able to do with it, the choices that they can and cannot make. I mean, we're very lucky in the UK that we have that freedom. There's a lot of places in the world that don't let women have those options. And I think that's why Tracey is so controversial, so powerful, so important. So important.
I agree.
Diane, I have loved talking to you. Thank you
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
No, of course. And you've really made me look at these pieces in a completely different way. I do really think everything happens for a reason. And I've come back to these works a little bit older, a little bit wiser. Different things have happened. I've experienced the world a little bit more. But I love that Tracey always makes you question. And I forever hope that she continues to do that. And anyone that's listening that has never seen the tent, even if you Google Tracey Emin tent, you will be astounded by, I think you'll agree with me, the world of information in and around this piece. Diane, thank you so much. For everyone listening, where can people find you and connect with you?
Astrologically, I'm Nuguma on Facebook, Nuguma. And I've got a website, nuguma.com, and positive-elements.com. It's the same information, but packaged a bit differently. Sort of workshops, sort of self-esteem workshops with kids and stuff, using astrology as well, or teenagers, it's best. Diane Ketteringham.art, where I started doing interactive art installations, and years after I saw that I wasn't doing any art, so I kind of stumbled into doing some installations, looking at different things, where sometimes I'm one of the interactive parts in the middle of it. People have to deal with me as part of it. So those are where I'm mainly found. And which gallery do you work in?
Which gallery? I can be found. So during the day when the world is working and we're not all sort of confined to inside, I work for a sculpture gallery called Pangolin London, and it's based in King's Cross. So it's in a building called King's Place. So you can find me there, or you can find me online on Instagram. Thank you. No one's ever thrown that question back. Thanks very much, Diane.
I was curious.
But yeah, amazing. It's been lovely to have you on.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And there you have it, the end of another episode of the Jo's Art History podcast. Once again, thank you so much to Diane for coming on and talking so brilliantly about Tracey Emin's incredible tent. And thank you also for giving us an astrologer point of view on Tracey's birth chart as well. I think it's a really interesting way of looking at things. So thank you once again. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure that you like, rate and subscribe if you're able to do so. And it would be really brilliant if you could pass on this podcast to anyone that you feel would enjoy it. It helps other people find us, and it would mean a lot to me as well. There's a lot of hard work that goes on to make this podcast happen, and I would really love to get more people listening to it. So thank you so much. If you'd like to get in touch and discuss anything that you've heard today, you can email me, joesarthistory@gmail.com, or you can find me online via Instagram, and you'll find me at Jo's Art History. My DMs are always open. If you'd like to get in touch with Diane, her details are in the show notes below. And if you'd like to look at any of the images that we discussed today, you can find that exclusively on my Instagram in the highlights reel. So just go to the top of my Instagram page and look for the number that corresponds to the number of this podcast episode, and you'll find the images there, or you can give them a Google. Finally, I've been Jo McLaughlin, your host and your resident art historian, and thank you so much for listening to the Jo's Art History podcast, and I look forward to welcoming you next time. Until then, keep learning, and remember, art is for all. Bye.